Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So I don't know how you have all been feeling, but I think we all know that AI has been coming up pretty quickly, and the rate of change and progression in these AI models has been pretty staggering. And so I don't know if you guys have been feeling this, but I've certainly been thinking a lot about what sort of transformation is going to happen with AI, both at the workplace, but also in society at large. And the big question that I'm asking myself is what will be the meaning of labor in the future? And so basically, when you can offload a ton of white collar jobs, and we're talking like really good jobs, like lawyers, technicians, accountants, doctors, even people who specialize in, I mean, obviously, like doctors who are performing surgeries you're not doing right now, but like people who specialize in reading scans and things like that, that's going to be taken over by AI. What does this new world look like where you can no longer make a living or generate income from your work? And I'm not saying that this is going to happen for everyone, but there will be shifts, right, that are going to happen. Some people are going to get displaced, and they're no longer going to be able to make money from what they do. And in so many ways, this is just, sort of a repeat of what we did with blue collar work for a long time. I mean, manufacturing jobs, coal mines, um, anything that was done in the US that eventually got outsourced to sort of lower wage countries. Um, that's sort of what we're going to see happen with a lot of white collar jobs, information based jobs. But instead of outsourcing it to other countries, we'll be outsourcing it to AI. So, this has gotten me thinking a lot about, what do we do if we see this trajectory? And this is not an endorsement of AI. I'm not saying that it's good or bad. My personal philosophy is that AI can be certainly helpful, and I use it when I can, but I'm neither staking sort of the future on AI, nor am I trying to ignore it. I think the only thing we can do is be relatively nimble when it comes to the use of AI. We're gonna be, it's gonna be a lot of trial and error. Um, I think the goal is to make AI useful, and not just generate a lot of sort of bullshit work, right? Um, so, I think we all need to stay diligent about how we're using AI and how it's being deployed. But my cynical side says that there's a lot of CEOs, there's a lot of upper management who want to deploy AI as cost cutting measures. So they're looking to cut heads, right? They're looking to reduce headcount, and dump work onto the remaining employees, who then have to manage teams of AI agents instead. Let's say that happens in the next 5 years. We're already seeing the anticipation of that world where big companies are laying off 10% of their workforce. So the question then becomes, what do you do in this scenario, right? Um, I think that there's a couple things that you do, but I think primarily for me, this is going to exacerbate what's already happened. Look, I don't need to get into how consolidated wealth has become. I mean, when you have a few billionaires who have as much as sort of like the bottom 50% of the country, that's unsustainable. And it's because we live in a world where owners of capital derive far more wealth and income from owning capital than from their work. So whereas like most people have to work for their living, wealthy people just have to own capital. And basically, when you own the means of AI, that means you're owning capital and you're going to derive wealth from that. So, I think it just brings us back to number one, you just got to be investing. I know we can sort of have a philosophical argument about like, should we even be participating in a capitalist structure? But at the end of the day, if you're not owning capital, and the most accessible way to own capital is just to invest in the stock market, right? But if you're not doing that, then you're not participating in the rewards of owning capital, right? You're still relying completely on your labor. And so what happens when labor all of a sudden shifts to being barely able to generate income from that? What do you do if you're not owning capital? You haven't been participating in the revenues that come from that. So I think at this moment it feels like you need to be doubling down on your efforts to invest. And look, I know it's hard. I know that like part of it is having income to be able to invest. Um, but even if you can do like the smallest amount, I think it's obviously going to be beneficial in the long run. We're never going to be able to get up to the billionaires. Like they have so much wealth that just accumulates um, at such a rate that we just can't keep up with. But to sort of at least give yourself a buffer, I think it's important that you just continue to invest. And I'm not even saying that you have to invest in high tech or places where AI is sort of the bread and butter of like this new future. AI is going to be in everything. So you're just looking for companies that are able to continue to stay afloat in this new world, that can leverage AI, that can continue to operate, can find niches, companies that continue to provide services that are essential to humans, I think is just like important. But at this moment, AI is a huge growth space. So having some exposure to AI right now just will help keep up with the growth of sort of like the stock market. Outside of owning stocks, it's important that we all sort of making sure that we're educating ourselves on the merits of AI and the drawbacks and the limitations, right? Um, I think in this new world, there will be this tendency by sort of technologists or people who are readily adopting new technologies to use it for everything. But the truth is, and of course that will have to you'll have to experiment along the way to see what it's useful for. But I think it's about being really diligent um, and very purposeful about your use of AI. If it's not making you more productive, or if it's not making a better product at the end of the day, then you shouldn't be using it, right? Um, Efficiency is important, but if you're degrading your product, which is as a worker, whatever you output, it's kind of irrelevant. Um, the only way to actually make it useful is to produce more output at a higher quality, right? So I think it's important just to know how to assess quality when you're talking about AI. So it's becoming really a curator of that. Being very skeptical, asking questions, interrogating everything that comes out of it. So I think beyond investing, you just have to start to educate yourself and learn about AI and what it's actually useful for. We don't even know what kind of sort of garbage is going to get spit out. We've already seen an enormous amount of AI garbage getting spit out on the internet, and ultimately, I think it all becomes noise. So it's really important, I think, also to remember sort of what are the building blocks, the fundamental building blocks of life, right? And so much of that is relationship based. I think like what's really important now in stark contrast to what can be generated so easily by AI is like what can't AI do and that a human can do. And one of the major things that humans do really well is interact with other humans, right? Like sort of it's one of those qualities that can't be replicated by AI because inherent to it being useful and purposeful, you have to have another human there. Certainly, AI can mimic and sort of proxy human interaction, but there's something about it actually being another human that's really important. So, on top of sort of educating yourself around what good AI is or good AI outputs are, we can also think about where does AI fall short and how can we become best at that. So we have to remain best in class at relationships. I think it's really important that we remember that like this whole like human society exists because we have relationships with one another. And so that will never go extinct. In Even if AI becomes very good at replicating human behavior, people are still going to want to have relationships with real humans. Um, so I think like making sure that we're like always thinking about how do we better our relationships, create networks that are strong. How do we create a social system that is very robust and sturdy? Another thing that we can think about is getting very specialized in the use of AI. Right now, it's like you can tell that everything wants to be generic AI and that it's these large language models that, are sort of supposed to be adaptable to any environment. But I think we're finding already the sort of we're butting against the limits of where that becomes useful. And so yes, it's sort of endlessly adaptable to whatever question you have. But I think in the next 5 years, in the next year even, we're going to see that people need to become experts in deploying AI into very specialized fields and tasks. Because right now we assume some amount of error, some amount of hallucinations, but that won't be acceptable when AI begin doing tasks. So, understanding the pain points of different industries, and thinking very intelligently and critically about how we're going to deploy AI where it actually makes employees' lives better, it actually makes an end product better, it makes the customer experience better. I think that will be very crucial. So if you can position yourself as an expert in any like specific field, or get really good at deploying AI and understanding challenges within various fields, that will be a really useful skill to have. There are some other ways to use AI. Like obviously, like I think generally speaking, AI has been really good for making your own life more efficient, sort of offloading a lot of the mental burden for tasks that are probably not worth your time. But I think it's incredibly powerful for people who are freelancers, people who need to like create things, being able to leverage AI to just give yourself more hours when you're a sort of single entrepreneur or like um, a creator. You're limited by your time, but AI can help scale that. So I think that's one thing to think about when you're sort of like more of a self starter. How can you use AI to scale? Because we're always looking for ways to sort of scale our time that we don't have to rely simply on the hours that we have in our life, but we can create assets that will continue generating revenue for us. And that exists in so many places, and that's in a way participating and owning capital, right? If you can create assets, you own capital. It can be so many different things. Starting a business is something that scales. It doesn't rely on your time. You build something that can essentially be self-generating, or it can leverage its infrastructure to scale outward. So these are just like honestly thoughts that I've been having. There's so much uncertainty around the use of AI and what the world is going to look like. I think the major takeaway for me is that we're just going to see a world where capital consolidation is going up. Again, when there was power among workers and people who provided labor, there was more leverage and more equity. But we've seen the way capital has accumulated in the past few decades. And this is a continuation of that, but it's going to turbocharge it even more. When humans become less involved in productivity, it just starts to favor capital owners more. And the more capital you have, the more you accumulate. So the fewer number of people will have that capital. So, not like a pessimistic view. It's more of a cautionary sort of stand guard scenario for me. Again, this is a bit of a ramble. There's nothing like super actionable. I think it's just stay vigilant and continue to use AI where it's useful, and interrogate the results frequently. So yeah, I hope that you guys are all thinking about this, and I'm certainly am thinking about it all the time. Um, but I hope that maybe I've helped just even to start the thought process around it.